question: how do I tune in and feel the flow of higher energy? Well, it starts by realizing what I explained in several videos, including some of my breakthrough videos, that everything is energy. Science has told us that since 1905, when Einstein published the theory of relativity. So everything is actually made from energy, which means there is a natural flow of energy. We are in the material world, which is made from energy. Where did that energy come from? Well, it came from a higher realm, because energy is vibration. So the material world is made of energies of that vibrate within a certain spectrum. And then beyond that is higher levels of energy that vibrate at higher levels. And there is a natural flow of energy in the sense that the higher vibrational energy is reduced in vibration and flows into the physical spectrum. So when you talk about tuning in and feeling the flow of higher energy, you realize this is a perfectly natural flow. It's always there. In fact, you are conscious because there's a flow of energy from your I am presence, your higher self, that flows into the four levels of the material realm, as I explained in several videos. First flows into your identity, body or mind, then into the mental, then into the emotional, and then into the physical. That's why you're even conscious. Now, you may not be conscious of this flow, but that's what you can become. And I would say that it's obviously a process to become aware of this. You can come to a point where you can just feel it. You can just, close your eyes, tune in, and you feel the flow of energy. But if you're not at the point where you can do that, you need to realize something very simple. The flow is natural. So there can only be one explanation why you're not feeling it. That is that there's something in your mind that's blocking, not the flow, but your experience of the flow, preventing you from experiencing the flow. And what is that? Well, that is, as I explained in several videos, you have these structures in your subconscious mind that are called the subconscious selves or the separate selves. And as part of those selves, there is an accumulation of fear-based energy, and this pulls on your conscious attention, what I call the conscious you. So the core of your being, lower being here, is what I call the conscious you, which is neutral. It's pure awareness. It's not the outer personality. It's not these separate selves in the subconscious mind. So, but the thing is, the conscious you experiences itself based on its sense of self, we can say. And so for most people, their sense of self is defined in these subconscious selves that exist in the emotional, mental, and identity bodies. So the conscious you is pulled into these selves, and now it sees itself through that perception filter, through those colored glasses. And when you have many of these subconscious selves, separate selves, you see or identify yourself as a separate being, and therefore you don't experience the flow. So when you invoke spiritual light from your ascended masters through these decrees and invocations that are in the spiritual toolbox playlist, you can reduce the amount of energy that's part of these selves, and that reduces the flow or the pull on the conscious you. And when you then use the techniques I also talk about, where you can dissolve the selves, the more selves you dissolve, the more the conscious you is able to step outside of the outer personality and experience the flow. So what I'm saying is, experiencing the flow is the natural state. If you're not experiencing it, it's because something in your subconscious mind is pulling on the conscious you away from the experience, away from being attuned. And when you reduce that pull by transforming the energy and overcoming the selves, the conscious you will return to its natural state where it'll feel the flow. It's not that you're trying to, it's not that you have to do something or force the flow. I have seen people, and I actually went into it myself for a time when I was younger, who think that you have to force this flow. And you see all kinds of things out there. It's just amazing the amount of things that people have come up with throughout the ages. For example, the whole idea of spells. There are spells, and if you know these secret spells, you can force the light to flow into you. But Jesus said it 2,000 years ago. Fear not, little flock, it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. You don't need to force your higher self to give you energy. It's the natural state of the higher self to give you energy. But of course, everything is subject to a free will. So if you have this accumulated energy in these subconscious selves, they are basically causing you to refuse the energy, to deny the energy, to push it away from you. So you see how there are these people who got into what I call the consciousness separation. They think they're separate beings. They want to have power, or they want to have certain abilities. And they sense somehow that they need energy to do this. So they think, now I have to do something as a separate being to force my higher self to give me more energy. And then they think it's these spells, or it's these rituals, or it's this, whatever people have come up with. I mean, if you look at it historically, you can see that people in the state of separation, they have been very, very creative in coming up with all these kind of things. And it's basically comparable to if you said that people on earth had decided we have to find a way to force the sun to shine. Because we think the sun doesn't want to give us its light. So I have to find a way to force it to shine. Well, first of all, what could you possibly do here from Earth to change the sun, right? Second of all, why would you need to force the sun to shine when it's shining constantly? You're not experiencing the flow of energy because you are forcing yourself away from experiencing the flow. So stop forcing yourself. But instead people think, oh, they don't think, but the reality is they force themselves away from experiencing the flow of energy, and they think now they have to force their way back into it. But the more force they add, the more they close off the energy. And so what they end up doing instead is they steal energy from other people. And so then they gain a sense of power that way. And that's why you see, for example, false gurus who gain a following. And they seem to have certain powers, but it's not because they're receiving more energy from the I Am Presence, it's because they're stealing energy from their followers. And what I'm saying is, you can't actually force your I Am Presence to give you more energy, because if you go into separation, you become more and more selfish, and you want to have more and more, you want to use the energy for selfish purposes to get power for the separate self, for example. The I Am Presence would actually reduce the flow of energy. So the Ascended Masters explained that we have a crystal cord, it's called, from the I Am Presence to our lower energy fields of the 4 levels of our minds, and the energy flows through that from the I Am Presence. And the more unselfish you become, the wider becomes the cord, the pipeline, the more energy can flow through it. But the more selfish you become, the more you narrow down the pipeline, and this is done because the less energy you have, the less karma you can make. And therefore it actually helps you in the long run, even though you don't feel like that as a separate self who wants power. So, as I'm saying, when you overcome these separate selves, that is what makes you selfish. Not only will you experience the flow more, but you will also expand the flow, so there's more energy flowing. So we can't say it isn't. There are 2 aspects of it. One is to tune in so that you can consciously experience the flow, but the other is how big is the flow. And it works together. The more you overcome these separate selves, your identification with the separate selves, the more you will experience the flow, and the more energy will actually be flowing. So there is more of a flow to experience.